Something peculiar is happening in Sudan. Saudi Arabia recently signed a 99-year lease on 1 million acres of arable land. Pakistan has bought a piece of real estate as well. Jordanian, Lebanese, Emirati, Qatari, and even Syrian and Yemeni companies have all acquired large patchworks of farmland. Amidst this land grabbing, many nations are experiencing a demographic surge, and with that comes an ever-growing need for agricultural resources. Sudan has nearly as much as arable land as the entire Arab world combined, which is why everyone is rushing to get as much property as possible, since the African state is best suited to emerge as the next breadbasket. But having come to power in 2019, the new civilian government has inherited a hostile deep state, civil unrest, and half a century of bad policy. So let's go over the future and history of Sudan's breadbasket dreams. I'm your host Shirvan, and welcome to Caspian Report. Working with digital files always carries risks. NordLocker is an app that encrypts your data so you can keep them securely on your computer, cloud, or whenever you're sending files to others. It's one of the easiest apps that I've come across. A simple drag and drop is all it takes to encrypt your documents. No one can access it without your knowledge. Visit nordlocker.net/CaspianReport. The first 2 GB is free, and if you like the app, use the promo code CaspianReport to get a discount on the premium version. Measuring just under 1.9 million square kilometers, Sudan is one of the giants of Africa. The state occupies a strategic position between the Sahara and the Savannah. Its landscape poses a diverse mixture of habitats ranging from the dry desert flats of the north to the lush rainforest highlands of the south. From these southern territories, the Blue Nile flows north, connecting at the capital Khartoum in a junction with the White Nile. Sitting on this point on convergence, Khartoum is blessed with an abundance of fresh water and consistent sunlight throughout the year. It's no surprise then that agriculture is the second largest sector after hydrocarbons, accounting for more than 30% of Sudan's total GDP. It is estimated that the country is home to over 200 million acres of arable land that stretches along its southeast, which is unparalleled in the wider periphery. Freshwater supply from the White Nile and Blue Nile rivers replenishes the soil, making it ideal for year-round agriculture. To put matters into context, Sudan accounts for 45% of all the arable land in the entire Arab world. That right there is strategic value. Plus, the country has a coastline of about 500 kilometers by the Red Sea, allowing it to connect to the global markets. Port Sudan, for instance, is located less than a day's sail to the Saudi port of Jeddah. So why hasn't Sudan already developed into a breadbasket as it is? Well, it tried, but the ambition was suppressed due to the never-ending political intrigue in the capital. Now, however, Sudan is once again under the international spotlight as rapid population growth and food insecurity become more urgent matters. Egypt's population is predicted to increase by 50 million by mid-century, while Iraq will see an additional 30 million citizens in the same period. Yemen will grow by 18 million people, Algeria by 17, while Saudi Arabia and Morocco will each gain 10 million people by 2050. All these additional mouths require an increasing pool of resources. So having survived the turbulence of the Arab Spring, the wealthy nations of the Arabian Peninsula are now searching for means to stave off rapidly approaching demographic calamities. Even more urgent demographic trends are taking shape within Africa. By 2050, the continental population is expected to double. Nigeria, for example, witnessed a dramatic growth whereby its population increased from 95 million in the 1990s to nearly 201 million in 2019 and will further grow to 401 million by 2050. Meanwhile, in neighboring Niger, the fertility rate tops the world chart at 7 births per woman, a recipe for social unrest. However, While most nations face potential social disasters, Sudan has the opportunity to expand and diversify its clientele while serving the needs of up to a quarter of the world's total population. But to succeed in the future, we must analyze the mistakes of the past. Standing in the way of Sudan's breadbasket dreams is 50 years of bad policy, a story that begins in the capital. Based in the center of the country, Khartoum has the appearance of an organic seat of power, but looks can be deceiving. Khartoum is as much a symbol of Sudan's potential as it is a symbol of its decay. While Arab Sudanese occupy the geographical center of the country, the periphery is dominated by nearly 600 distinct ethnicities, many of whom are opposed to the rule from the culturally and geographically distant capital. To complicate matters, most of Sudan's borders, mineral wealth, and abundant oil reserves are occupied by ethnic minorities and their respective militias. This not only separates the Khartoum government from resource revenues, but also renders the country vulnerable to foreign interference. To sum things up, Sudan is no easy country to secure, much less govern. In the first 50 years of its existence, the political agenda of Sudanese lawmakers was to maintain territorial integrity while appeasing the Arab elite. This internal power struggle was the result of history and geography. Whilst culturally distinct to the Arab world, Sudan was nonetheless incorporated into the Ottoman Egyptian realm in 1821. When decades later, in 1885, the Ottoman Egyptian authorities banned slavery, a major revolt ignited and resulted in the Sudanese Mahdi's Rebellion. A long and bitter conflict ensued whereby the Sudanese sought to expel Egyptian rule. It was only with the intervention of a coalition of nations, including the British Empire, the Kingdom of Italy, the Ethiopian Empire, and the Viceroy of Egypt, that the revolt was crushed. In the aftermath, Sudan was brought under the joint Anglo-Egyptian administration, with a division between the predominantly Muslim Arabic-speaking north and a predominantly animist and Christian south. Defeated but not destroyed, the Islamist forces retreated into the society where they continued to play an important role in Sudanese politics. Upon gaining independence from the British in 1956, both Sudanese domains were relinquished as a unitary state. The South became part of the politics of the North, even though it was distinctly different in every imaginable way. Feeling betrayed by the British, the southern Sudanese leaders took up arms against the capital Khartoum, launching the first of two Sudanese civil conflicts. As the hostilities tore through the agricultural heartland in the south, the capital was rocked by a series of coups and counter-coups, which froze development and plunged the rest of the country into civil disobedience and chaos. Any attempt to pursue the breadbasket dream fell to wayside as investors withdrew support. Eventually, in 1989, Colonel Omar al-Bashir seized power. Future prospects seemed optimistic at first. However, the new power brokers in Khartoum believed that the source of Sudan's grievances was a lack of piety. As a result, under the guidance of hardline Islamists, Sudan remodeled itself as an Islamic state. In consequence, the security apparatus was reinvented, while regime partners filled the roles of civil servants, judges, teachers, and military officers. State-owned businesses, meanwhile, diverted a portion of their earnings towards the zealous militias, and Sudanese mercenaries quickly earned a reputation for violence in South Sudan and Darfur. The dealings of President al-Bashir alienated his government from the international community as he engaged with multinational jihadist groups. Relations with Egypt collapsed following the assassination attempt on Hosni Mubarak by an Islamist group harbored by Sudan. At the same time, the Khartoum government sheltered Osama bin Laden and other Al-Qaeda members, which is why Sudan was listed among the United States' state sponsor of terrorism list in 1993. Internationally isolated and facing a US-enforced trade embargo, al-Bashir's government came to rely on oil revenues to maintain the bloated bureaucracy and the war effort in the south. In doing so, the once promising agricultural infrastructure, such as the Gezira irrigation scheme, which at the time was one of the largest irrigation projects in the world, was left to crumble as drought and civil strife rocked the country. By the turn of the millennium, Breadbasket Sudan had become a food importer. The land of plenty could barely feed its own people. Things took a turn for the worse in 2011 when South Sudan gained independence. The government in Khartoum lost 75% of its oil revenues overnight, almost 40% of its total revenue at the time. With a focus on its survival, the state began reaching out to cash-rich, food-poor investors such as the Gulf Arab states. In a twisted reinvigoration of the 1970s Breadbasket project, agricultural land was generously parceled out to investors in exchange for political and financial support. For global investors, the land was sold below market value and unburdened by state taxes. For Khartoum, however, such investments were guided by backdoor diplomacy. For instance, in exchange for investment, Sudan participated in the Saudi-led military intervention in Yemen and loaned Sukin Island to Turkey in perpetuity, and so on. The point is that foreign investors were as much purchasing agricultural land as they were purchasing influence. Consequently, in recent years, Sudan has become a playground for geopolitical competition, and its people the victims of a rapidly expanding foreign land expropriation. This dramatic shift did not take place without opposition. When Sudanese citizens, spurred on by soaring inflation and fuel shortages, took to the streets in December 2018, the question of foreign land ownership was a looming issue. That is because international agriculture companies often act with impunity in Sudan, in some cases overpumping local aquifers and causing water shortages in the nearby villages. So while foreign multinationals export wheat from Sudan to the Persian Gulf, the desertification of the previously arable land has led the populace to the brink of starvation. Even today, following the ousting of al-Bashir and the transition to democracy in 2019, the future of Sudan is all but certain. The new Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is a rational lawmaker, but 50 years of bad policy is not easily corrected. Significant forces are working against him. The state is $60 billion in debt. The economy is at a standstill, and the civil service is filled with al-Bashir loyalists. Earlier this month, there was even an assassination attempt on the head of the government. The next steps by Prime Minister Hamdok are critical, but it is already evident that Sudan's economic salvation cannot rely exclusively on the Arab world. Khartoum needs non-Arabic international partners, but to attract long-term investors, the new government must first lobby to remove Sudan from the United States' state sponsor of terrorism list. Doing so will end the US sanctions and the secondary international sanctions, and thereby open the door towards economic liberalization. On the surface, the situation in Sudan may seem hopeless, but necessity is the mother of invention. The current global demographic trends are unstoppable. Populations are expanding and the needs of societies are growing. Now, more than ever, Sudan has the potential to emerge as a breadbasket. The geography is there, it just needs the right policy and mindset. I've been your host Shirvan from CaspianReport. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, reaction, or enable the notification bell. Thank you for watching, and Sahol.